Welcome back to episode 8 of Ria's Streaming Vlog, the show where I talk about my experiences as a streamer and content creator in the hopes that I can share stories, entertain, encourage some thought provoking discussion, and maybe provide some advice that you can take with you, whether you're a streamer or not. Today, I want to talk about this vlog as a whole and where it sits in the greater scheme of YouTube and its almighty algorithm. Even though I speak a little bit differently than the others, focusing more on my personal experiences, life experiences as someone who is LGBTQ and neurodivergent, in my time as a student of economics, I would still say that this vlog falls under the general category of channels that offer advice to streamers and content creators. And both to that end and also to improve my own content creation skills, I have spent more time than is probably completely healthy binge watching a number of other advice channels and listening to their tips about how to improve as a streamer and content creator. The fact is, I'm still not what you would call sufficiently credentialed or experienced to really be able to offer advice to the same degree as those other channels. But I thought, well, maybe I could contribute something just a little bit different on a similar related stuff. The fact is, if you search for advice on pretty much any topic online, whether that's Reddit, YouTube, Google, or any number of other sites, you're going to have a lot of different people offering a lot of different advice. They're going to offer different tips, suggestions, and answers. Not just about streaming, mind you, but just about anything in general. Some of it is good advice. Some of it is lackluster advice from people who are well meaning, but ultimately misguided or misinformed. And some of it is snake oil or bovine feces. So I thought I'd do a video to offer my advice about advice, or to elaborate just a little bit. I thought I'd make a video about things to consider when distinguishing between the good, the bad, and the ugly when it comes to advice. This isn't a video that's going to debunk bad advice on any particular topic, but rather it's one to get you to think critically about the advice that you are getting. So I'm going to offer four different tips. My first piece of advice would be that if somebody is overly confident about their advice or their forecast, I'd be very, very wary of what they have to say because they're probably not being completely forthright with you. One maxim I've heard from lessons in statistics is that extrapolation and prediction is extremely complicated and imprecise, especially when you're dealing about the future. When I hear an alleged expert being super confident about a prediction or a forecast, I'm going to be thinking that they might be more a charlatan than an expert. Real advice often, usually comes with caveats, uncertainty, and the potential for error. There's a story in economics about how Harry Truman complained about a lack of one handed economists because anytime the former president asked a question about economics, the answer would always be, well, on the one hand, and then continue with, but then again, on the other. On the contrary, while those answers are unsatisfactory and you might not like to hear those are more likely to be truthful and to convey the appropriate degrees of uncertainty. Obviously, if it's a very simple question, that's not going to hold. But for questions that don't have clear cut answers, I would be extremely wary of anybody who seems too confident in their answer or seems unwilling to change their beliefs in response to better information. And I'd be very, very, very wary of anyone who feels the need to overly protest, yes, I know what I'm doing, or you just gotta trust me, or I'm very much a stable genius. Secondly, if a task is pretty difficult and there are a lot of people trying to be successful, I am skeptical whenever somebody offers an easy fix to a complicated and difficult problem. Yeah, that means all those feed worthy, clickbaity headlines about one weird trick to losing weight or growing your stream or attracting a supermodel, or I think you get the idea. I tend not to trust those super clickbaity titles because if they were really an easy, foolproof trick to success, wouldn't everybody be doing so? It doesn't necessarily mean the advice is bad, but I find that good advice doesn't necessarily need to be obscured by click. Third, the wisdom of the crowds is important, with an asterisk. If there are a lot of different voices giving the same piece or very similar piece of advice, it's probably more reputable than if advice is coming from only one source and everybody else is saying something else. However, if you're searching on YouTube specifically or another search engine, I would caution that more viewed videos or sites rated higher in the algorithm are not necessarily an indicator of better objective quality. At least when it comes to YouTube, the information I have about the algorithm suggests the YouTube algorithm has a single purpose. They want to increase the amount of time you spend watching YouTube videos so that they can serve you more ads and make more money. This means that videos which confirm pre existing biases and stoke strong emotions in people might be highly likely to be recommended by the algorithm, irrespective of whether the informational quality of the video is particularly high. Similarly, I've heard some people say that, hey, if a video gets more views, that might mean that I should trust the information a little bit more. However, at some point, usually around the time that the algorithm starts recommending a video, there's going to be a bifurcation between quality and number of views due to something called an information cascade. If a video gets a lot of views, it gets recommended more often, which often leads to more views, more recommendations, or so forth. That means you might trust the video that has 1,000 views more than the one that only has 10, but that means that you shouldn't maybe value the opinions and the advice given in a video with 1,000,000 views over one that has only 10,000. This is a counterpoint to that common sense notion that you should necessarily trust the most popular, most viewed videos solely because they're popular or distinguished. As another counterpoint, be wary if everybody is just parroting the same advice. There can be some advice that comes from experts who are very credentialed, very experienced, very charismatic, and very, very, very wrong. And finally, possibly most importantly, consider the incentives that people have when they offer their advice. Obviously, the most prominent example is advertising. But consider the difference between a sponsored review for a product and an independent review. If the review is positive, I'm going to trust it a little bit stronger if the review is truly independent and no incentives were given to review a given product. On the other hand, if a review is negative and that's a sponsored review, then I'm going to pay attention to that a whole heck of a lot. I don't know if I've ever actually seen it happen. It's possibly an extreme example, but if somebody is willing to sacrifice a potential partnership and revenue down the road in order to post that negative review, that speaks very, very strongly that that's a product I very much want to avoid. YouTubers, they want clicks and viewership. So think about that as an incentive. Salespeople obviously want to sell products. Politicians will say or do whatever they feel might get them elected or reelected or to raise money for the same goal. In my economics video, which is episode 4, I'll link that up above and in the description, I mentioned the importance of scarcity and marginal utility. But a facet nearly as important is that people and businesses respond to incentive. People act in accordance with their wants and desires, and they respond to the incentives of the systems in which they operate. When the advice they give seems contrary to those incentives, another factor, such as a desire for honesty, which psychologically that actually does seem to be the case, most people do want to be truthful, all other things equal. But that may be what's driving their behavior rather than financial incentive. So there we have. There's 4 tips I've given you for evaluating the advice that you get both on the internet and more generally. If you enjoyed this video, found it interesting, entertaining, or informational, please consider giving it a like so the algorithm likes it more. Please consider giving a subscribe button down below. Leave a comment if you feel I left something important out or disagree with one of these tips. And until next time, stay hydrated, my friends.